he changed the view of hashgacha about. It wasn't. It was way before the dash, right?
No, in fact, the last Lubavitcher Rebbe was convinced it was the best,
Really?
and yes, and in the Sifsei Chaim he writes that he gives a source in the Gra and says the origin was the Gra. When we discussed this machlokas on, so it's interesting. So Litvak thinks it's a Litvish Chiddush, and the Chassid thinks it's a Chassidish Chiddush. Now here's what's really funny. When we discussed this on Avoda, Rabbi Yaakov Feldman believed that it was a necessary implication of something the Ramchal wrote. That while the Ramchal doesn't say it outright, there's a quote in Derashah Hashem, which seems to obviously assume that Hashgacha is universal. In which case, it's from the Ramchal, who has a slightly earlier overlap with the Besht, but it's not way before. Since we're raising the subject, although I can't give you details because I don't have the sources at my fingertips, my own personal take on this is that philosophy changed. The interests of philosophy changed between the Rishonim and the 18th century, which is when these people were living, right? Because to the Rishonim, philosophy was the Greeks or Neoplatonism or something based on the Greeks. So the main interest was what does really exist? What really causes, causes? And what how does the nature work and what causes the nature to work that way? And everything was about realities. By the time we get to the 18th century, the main concern of philosophy is why does the world look the way it does? It got much more. I mean, we're on the verge of Kant. We've already had the idealists and the empiricists arguing about what it is you could really know and how much you can't really know. And this idea that we're ever going to get to the grounding of reality, the ultimate grounding of reality, was going out the window. So what I think happened was to the Rambam, the Ramban, the Ran, the Kuzari, the question of Ashkacha was about, is there an actual entity running the world that Hashem delegated the running of the world to? Nowadays, Hashgacha Pratis is more involved in conversations of bitachon and ishtadlut. And how do we relate to events? In other words, it's one thing to say that that what's it called? That in practice, Hashem delegated authority because He wants things to run according to certain patterns, and therefore He causes something that causes something, but that latter cause, once He releases the mashchis, right, it's going to run naturally. It's another thing when you're talking about should I act, how should I relate my religious life to my outcomes, or my the events in my life to the things I decide and do. When Hashgacha changes topics, you're not really discussing the same topic anymore. I'm arguing that the Ramchal, Baal Shem Tov, Gra version of Hashgacha Pratis is different because the topic of conversation is different. And not because there was some fundamental upheaval about how Jews understood reality. It went from discussing, is there an angel or a set of angels that are responsible for nature who sometimes get control, to whether I should be thinking about them or thinking through them to God when I act. And that difference in topic yields what sounds like a very different answer. That's my own making peace with the idea that things totally changed in 100 years. The Ramban, by the way, has one quote that everybody quotes to say that everything is from Hashem, that there's revealed miracles and unrevealed miracles, but everything that happens is from Hashem. But there are other Rambans. Rabbi Dr. David Berger has a long article trying to make a single story out of all of them. I'm sure you could
Yeah,
do
well,
other. I'm
the
sure you
thing
could do
is, it
other single
says,
stories, but I don't
like it
think you could
says,
just take.
no one has a portion in the Torah of Moshe if they don't hold like that, which is pretty stark. Obviously, you can get into situations where, like Rabbi Slifkin, when Rabbi Yashiv, I think, said they could say it, but we can't. But
No. That would be backwards, because he's saying they couldn't say it, but we can. Right?
No. Rationalist Rishonim, I think that was. It was
No.
many years ago.
But the Ramban himself says it. That was the point of David Berger's article. Even though that one quote makes it sound like that, the Ramban himself says it. The Ramban probably holds something like the Ran, the bottom line, like once you collect all the sources. But we went off on a topic I'm unprepared in. In other words,
how does this affect when someone nowadays, whether their opinions can be seen as kfira?
No, I'm saying the Ran doesn't say that it's kfira. You're taking one quote out of a dozen of quotes of the Ramban on the subject. The Ramban doesn't say it's kfira. He can't, because he himself says that there are events that are teva and not hashgacha.
Right.
So it can't be what he means in Bo. The question is, what does he mean? But in any case, whether or not something is wrong or something is kfira is actually a halachic question. In other words, if they say it's kfira, they're definitely saying it's wrong, right? Because something can't be both true and kfira. But kfira is a halachic category. It has to do with who can you accept them as a convert? Can you handle wine that they touched? It touches questions of counting them for a minyan and eidos and so on. It's a halachic category, and the rules of Pesach apply. Like heresy is not just a label, right? It's part of the definition of who's a heretic. It may not even be the entire definition, by the way. The Ridvaz famously says it's somebody who was misled for reasons other than rebellion, just because they misunderstood a pasuk or a source, is not a kofar, even if he believes in kfira. So it's not so simple. I mean, obviously the Rambam has a different approach to kfira, but because the Rambam believes that the afterlife is caused by having the right beliefs. So if you're Nebuch a kofar, you're Nebuch a kofar, as the Nebuch Apikoris, as the famous legend or quote from Rav Chaim says. But no, I believe the Ramban would say what the Ran says, which is not, remember, they're a couple on, they're not living the same generation, but they're living in the same society, right? I think the Ramban was saying that if you don't believe that even the natural is being caused by the Ribono Shel Olam, you're a kofar. That's different than he intervenes and doesn't let nature happen, and there's no natural events. But you really have to go through the sources. And David Berger has one resolution, and I wasn't even convinced it's the only one or the right one. But he does have a list of, the article is valuable in that he shows you the Ramban can't mean what the typical Shabbos morning Derashah guy is going to be telling you it means, because then the Ramban himself is saying kfira, like elsewhere on Chumash. So I owe you that.
Where did he publish it?
I don't know. You asked me a question on the blue. I don't have the topic at my fingertips.
I'm sorry, Ravi.
No, this isn't the topic I prepared. That's why I kept on telling you. I can't give you details.
Okay, please, Malcolm.
Ramban Hashgacha Pratis. Let's see where it is. Okay, so Torah Har Tzion, quotes him in footnote 3. Okay, there it is. Miracles in the Natural Order in Nachmanides, Rabbi Moses Nachmanides. Oh, Natan Slifkin. Oh no, Natan Slifkin used to have the article on his website, but now it's a 404 error. It's in a book called Rabbi Moses Nachman. Well, I'll send you the footnote, but the link of the footnote's useless because I just tried it and it's a 404. It's not there anymore. But either way, it's in the WhatsApp. It would be in the WhatsApp if return was the same as send. It's now in the WhatsApp. Okay, that's the best I could do. Okay, so with all this talk about how Nevuah works and how Nisim work, and I repeatedly referred back to the Gra on these topics, I decided that after the Derashah Gimel, we would detour and see what the Maharal says on these topics, because we had fun with the Maharal in the past, so why not? We'll get started tonight, but I have more than 15 minutes of material on it, so that's the way it goes. There's 3 introductions to his Gevuros Hashem. The first one is about the human limitations of human knowledge and Nevuah. It's a combined topic. We'll see in a minute why. So he says here, Kvod Hashem, Kvod Elokim Hester Dover. Right, there's a quote from Mishlei again. Mishlei is getting a lot of mileage tonight. Kvod Malachim Chakor Dover. It's the glory. It's to Hashem's kavod when things are hidden, and it's to the king's kavod when they search it out. B'medrash Bereshis Rabbah, Rabbi Levi b'Shem Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Maschelas Sefer Bereshis ad vayichulo, Mitchilas Sefer Bereshis ad vayichulo, everything from Genesis 1:1 through Kiddush, through Vayichlu Hashemaim Va'aretz, Kvod Elokim Hester Dover. That's what it means when it says the glory of God is a hidden thing. If you remember, was it on this list or was it somewhere else that I mentioned that the Maharal believes that the Maaseh Bereshis is totally incomprehensible and there's a pshat to the first parak, but we're not going to get it. This is one of the places where he says something about this, right? The first parak is Kvod Elokim Hester Davar. It's God's glory because it's hidden. Mikan ve'elech hakor davar. And everything after Vayichulu, that you should search out. L'masha yasagas ha'adam misyacheses el ha'adam v'masha hu asagaso. A person's understanding, it relates to a person only in the things that they only in their understanding. That's not very clear. I think the translator did us a favor here. He says that a person's understanding is only relates to a person what is within his understanding, meaning we only understand things we can relate to. There's subjectiveness to what we can understand. So a necessary implication of this, the thing that is understood, it can't be entirely alien to the person who's trying to understand it. If it was totally alien from the person who's trying to understand it, a person couldn't understand it. If you can't relate to it, you can't understand it. Because we already said that the understanding of a person is in relation to himself. Yichuyav mizeh, shadavar shu nivdal mimenu legamrei, achar shu nivdal mimenu, in ro yishayiyah adam la'adam hasagabo. Therefore, it is that something that is alien to him, for the very cause that it's alien to him, it's not roy that a person should be able to understand. So Maharal is pretty alien to what people said. In fact, this is a point the Rambam makes, that it's like trying to understand the life cycle, how a fetus breathes, gets oxygen, or just life in the womb altogether, when all you know about is people after they're born, right? He likens that to trying to understand Maharal when all you know is the universe once it was done being created. So the Maharal is saying something along the same lines, that the act of creation is nothing like we've ever experienced. We have no relationship to it, so don't expect to understand it. The fact that it's so alien is part of Gevuros Hashem, shows how beyond us God actually is. V'zehu hasiba, this is the reason, shelo nizkar b'Torah b'ferish olam haba. And this is why, according to Maharal, it doesn't mention olam haba. O sheris hanefesh achar misa, or the fact, or eternal, existence of the soul after death. Shilu haya divrei Torah kamo melech basar v'dam. If the Torah were like a person's words, a human king's words, shumazir savadav shuli yavru es savaso, he warns people not to violate his command, baz yiskulas chartov, because if they do, they'll get the great reward. He assures them he's going to give them. If God wanted to say, keep my word and then you'll get reward, that just like a king would say, then of course he would have told us all about Olam Haba and Gan Eden. When a person drifts from the command, and rebels against his creator, so then he would be judged for Gehenna. But because the Torah is the words of the living God, or the God of life, as transmitted through the Navi. Therefore, everything in the Torah can only be what the Navi can understand. And these things are just totally beyond, totally separated from a person who is physical, who's living in a body. They're not with us in our existence. And just like they are separated from him and not with him, similarly, their knowledge is very far away from a person, and separated from him. And therefore they don't enter the comprehension of the Navi, something that is separated from people. So a Navi is limited in that he can only give Nevuah on something that is within human experience. If you think about this goes back to what we said about Nevuah, that whether you say Nevuah is a message from Hashem, or you say Nevuah is an experience of a loftier reality, it reaches a Navi by being clothed in physical metaphor. There has to be something about the Nevuah that a person can relate to, right? That is comparable, right, to his normal everyday existence, or else the Navi just doesn't get it. So it's possible even that the Maharal would allow that Hashem would communicate to the Navi, shout at the Navi, so to speak, something that is not related to his personal experience, but the Navi wouldn't have been able to hear it. So every Nevuah has to be comparable to something in his everyday life. This is a difference between chakham, between wisdom and prophecy. A chakham can understand from his intellect. And since he could comprehend, he could grasp through his intellect, he could get to things that are very hidden and esoteric. But a navi is called a visionary, a roeh, or one who sees. Because you see something, it means that you're outside it and you're looking at it from the outside. Therefore, the Navi needs some connection, needs some attachment to the thing that he gets nevuah about. And he becomes attached to these things. And he'll know them through his nevuah. So a chakham could actually deduce things that go beyond his experience. The building blocks may have to be founded on experience, but he could put them together to get beyond experience. Whereas nevuah itself is an experience. So if it's totally unlike his other experiences, the Navi can't get there. It's not like a chakham who's taking experiences and reaching conclusions beyond experience. This is only, it has to be compared. He has to have a comparable. A Navi has to have a comparable. A chakham doesn't. Chakham could work from comparables to something that is beyond his experience. And lefi chachamim, and therefore chacham said, chakham adif minavi, that a chakham is greater, is better than a navi. Beer zeh, what's the explanation? Ki nevuah dome kadavar l'chush ayin, because nevuah, as I said, nevuah is always seen in metaphor. It has to be something that is similar to something he's seen. There has to be a metaphor, a simile, a comparison, a something. That the person sensing can see from the outside. Even though nevuah is not through physical senses, just like the senses, right, have some attachment to the thing being sensed, to the object being sensed. Similarly, the power of nevuah of the navi, which is a comparative power, omashahu, or imaginary power. But remember, we had this last time we discussed the Maharal. When they talk about koach hamadame, they're not talking about imagination in the modern sense of the word. They're talking the ability to not only see things that aren't there, but the ability to know what red is. Not to know what red is about, to experientially know what red is. That's koach hamadame. The philosophical term in some conversations is qualia. It's the redness of red. The difference between a scientist knowing what red is and somebody who has, healthy color vision knowing what red is. Like the late night dorm room conversation. Maybe your red is my green. How would we ever know? Because we're both calling it red. But in my head, what I see as green is what you call red. Like, how would you know? How would you know? Right? So that is
sending me back to yeshiva, Mincha.
Yeah, well, in my case, it was the YU dorm room, but yeah.
In my case, it was Beishaga, but the same conversations. We all had the same conversation.
Yeah. No, everybody does. That's why I could draw on it, right?
Yes.
But the point is that is chakham and dame, not imagine. When Aristotle used whatever Greek word evolved into imagination, into the word imagination, that is what they're translating. The chakham and dame is a power to have an image in your head, or a smell in your head, or a sound, like remembering what so and so sounded like. That's chakham and dame. Even though it's a memory, the fact that you're not remembering about, but you're remembering the experience, that's chakham and dame. Omashu koach hamakabel hanavua, or the other power of receiving navua. Shu mistabek b'davar shuhu misnabe'elav. It relates to the object that he is having navua about. So a navi connects to an object, maybe not through sensory perception, but something that involves the koach hamadame, the ability to have an experience. And therefore, it has to be something that he can relate to enough to experience. Whereas a chakham is thinking about things, and therefore could reach conclusions not only about experiences, but going beyond the experience. There's a bit of a duplication here. I had hoped to edit out because, yeah, okay, what could I do? So up to here. L'kach olam haba basharas hanefesh. Therefore, olam haba and the persistence of the soul, yispar yosem chachma, is more explanatory than chakhma. Sorry, is more explainable by chakhma. Now that I made it wider so I wouldn't have to keep on scrolling, I lost the place. I'm going to lose the time anyway. Oh, yeah, I'm really far down. Okay. Shachakham masig advar manelamim. A chakham could understand things that are hidden. Yoseri mashi yisbar b'nevuah, more than that could be explained through nevuah. Chakham adif minavi. Therefore, the chakham is greater than the navi. Mashu yachol lahasig davar she'iev shar b'nevuah, because he can understand things that can't be understood. That's not possible through nevuah. Shekoach nevuah mistamel chush ha'ayin amakabel muchshav mibachutz. It's similar to sight, the power of the eye, to see things from the outside. Therefore, how could the Torah have any words of olam haba she'ein zeh me'inyan hanevuah? Because that's not in the realm of nevuah. Somebody who understands the difference between a chakham and a navi, it cannot be. Because Nevi'im had to be attached to the thing that they gave Nevuah about. Quick question, show of hands. You think the Rambam would say this? I guess nobody wants to show their hands. See, to me, it seems that the Maharal is saying that all Nevuah, including the Torah, goes through the koach hadimyon, goes through the vision, right? This metaphoric vision stage. And that's why even the Torah doesn't discuss olam haba. But the Rambam makes a point of saying that Moshe's Nevuah is different. So I think he's not making Moshe's Nevuah as different from other Nevi'im, as much different from other Nevi'im as the Rambam would have.
I'm thinking a lot of this, it sounds like it's kind of opposite to ideas that are floating around today. I mean, well, first off, you used the word imaginary. The nevuah is imaginary. No, the nevuah isn't imaginary. Imaginary is non-real.
No. I made a point of saying that's not what imaginary means.
I think what you meant is imaginative, the imaginative faculty.
Exactly. No.
The capacity to imagine,
okay.
rather than.
I agree that's what I meant, but yeah. I actually said as much.
Yeah.
I gave the example.
That was the word that meant what you were talking about.
Right. I gave the example of the red and maybe my red is red your green.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to say that it's what Aristotle called imagination. It's not what we call imagination. So the imaginative faculty, that's the non-ambiguous term. Okay.
Okay. But the other thing was it's an interesting way of defining chakham, adif, minavi. Because it's like the opposite of the slogan that YU has been using for years, it and not about it. They learn Gemara, but they don't learn about Gemara, like the other seminaries learn about Gemara. So, but you're saying that the chakham is greater because he learns about it, about the ideas that the nevuah can only transmit the content that God says. This is your nevuah. This is what you're going to say.
Yeah, in the sense of it and about it, yes, but there's such different it's. I don't know if it's really the opposite of YU's old motto. The reason why I say that is what the Navi is doing is collecting first principles because he's collecting experiences. So the it of the Navi is the truth that he experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
The about it of the chakham is taking the it's that the Navi experienced and getting 1 + 1 is 2.
Yeah.
He's thinking about the first principles to reach something, but he's not going in my mashal. He's not thinking about addition. He's using addition to think about 1 to reach 2.
Yeah.
So I don't really know if I mean, like, it's not saying the chakham thinks about Gemara instead of thinking Gemara, but rather Gemara takes a bunch of is about psukim. Right? It's a deductive process about derashos, about conclusions reached by Derashah. Derashah is about psukim. So, but my point was more that it builds. Chachma builds and extrapolates and interpolates, and nevuah is experiencing a truth directly, and therefore it has to be something experienceable. Whereas deduction is you can conclude things from experienceables to non-experienceables. I think that's really his point.
Yeah.
Lefichach amru chachamim. Therefore, I'm going to end at the end of Vav. Lefichach amru chachamim. Therefore, Chazal said, Kol HaNevi'im, the Gemara says, Kol HaNevi'im lo nisnabu elo yimei HaMashiach. Nevi'im only gave their prophecy for the Messianic era. Well, olam haba ayin lo rasas ulasecha. Right? We only gave nevuah not for, but about Mashiach. We never got nevuah about olam haba, and we don't know from this if the Maharal means the period after Mashiach, or if he means the period between death and resurrection. Right? There are two definitions of olam haba. We don't know which one the Maharal is using. I'm not a Bakin Maharal. Maybe I'll remember to ask Pesach. He's not, there are experts in Maharal, but he's somebody I'll see in shul in the morning. Pesach Somer. So I'll see if he knows where the Maharal sits on how to use the word olam haba. But olam haba ayin lo rasas ulasecha. No one's seen it but you, right? If you anybody who's seen the afterlife is not here on earth testifying about it.
Fearing how do we know that there is an afterlife to even speculate about it? If there isn't nevuah telling us there is something beyond this, not that it's necessarily giving us any specifics.
Well
maybe that, right. I mean, that's a good question with the Maharal, right? The Ran just like 45 minutes ago gave his answer. It wasn't the first time either. He said if spirituality can impact this world, kal v'chomer, which is a chacham's way of doing things, because it's a kal v'chomer, it must also impact the spiritual world. So if Hashem could say, you do this and this on a national level, because remember, he questions how often Hashem intervenes on a retail level. But if he could say on a national level, you do this and this, and v'nasati esav those promises, right? Then lo kol shkein, you'd be getting reward on the spiritual level because it flows in that direction. There has to be an overflow on the spiritual if it's going to reach the physical. That's the Ran's approach. The Maharal, which is what we're looking at now, doesn't say. As I agree with you, that question is so far left open. Since nevuah requires sight, it's an external attachment. That which he knows through nevuah. So therefore, they can only talk about the messianic era. I mean, it's comparable to nowadays, maybe better, but it's in the same terms, it's the same language. The Nevi'im can give nevuah about it. It's not like a total mystery. Because Mashiach is part of Olam Hazeh. Not entirely different, alien from a person. Because it too is an Olam Hazeh. But Olam Haba, which is separated from this world, Ein Bo Nevuah. Nevuah doesn't reach it. Ki ayin lo rasazos. No eye saw this. Beina navin esnabe rak benevuah. Rak beri'iyah. I corrected the wrong letter the first time. Right? The pasuk says, "Ayin lo rasazulasecha." Your no eye has seen except you. I is the choseh of the nevuah of the navi. So ein navi misnabi rak beri'iyah. Navi only sees through the riyah. Commotion inspire. Amnam b'Torah, Siv Lirmos al Olam Haba, but the Torah can hint about Olam Haba, and I'll leave that for next week. But the question is this because Moshe's Nevuah is special, or because hints are different than actually describing, which is where John was going. Saying it exists and saying what it's like are different enough that that you could have nevuah about it existing altogether, even if you can't have nevuah describing it.